welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mehek Kelsey, and I'm a co-chair of the CSA Quantum Safe Security Working Group. I'm also a manager of security and privacy risk consulting at a global consulting firm. So today what we'll be discussing is the quantum threat and present the most recent developments in post-quantum cryptography and quantum cryptography. So let's get to know our experts.
Thank you, Mehak. I'm Bruno Höttner. I'm a Director of Strategic Initiative at ID Quantic. ID Quantic is one of the leaders in applications of quantum technology for cybersecurity. And I'm also the co-chair of the CSA Quantum Safe Security Working Group. I have the pleasure to work with Mehak on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruno, so much. Roger, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I've been doing cybersecurity for 35 years. I've written 13 books and 1,300 magazine articles on cybersecurity, but also lately, the last 5 years or so, I've written a book on quantum security, written certainly dozens of articles on it. And I think kind of my niche in the kind of the quantum security world is trying to help organizations prepare for the coming quantum threat.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Roger. And Will, last but not least, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Will Oxford. I'm a founder and CEO of a small company still called Animetric. We're a relatively newcomer to the quantum world, if you will. We've only been in business about 7 years. We specialize in building quantum photonic chips with cybersecurity as our primary application. Our company basically is made up of a bunch of industry veterans. We've all been building chips of one sort or another for over 30 years. I started out at Apple. I built chips for Apple for 14 years. My VP of Silicon at Animetric has a 30-year tenure of building chips for TI. So we know how to build chips. Our intent is to help usher in the PQC revolution in an easy, compact, inexpensive way.
Great, fantastic. Thanks so much for that background, and thanks everyone for sharing your information. So let's dive right in into our conversation. So this is basically what we're here for. So let's start with you, Roger. In your expert opinion, what's the biggest threat that cryptographically sufficient capable quantum computers pose to the computing world?
Yeah, it's a good thing to point out that quantum is mostly going to bring us a lot of good stuff, right? A lot of inventions and things and concepts that we didn't have before. But certainly the biggest threat, at least as we see it now, is that when quantum computers, which are kind of in their beginning stages, get sufficiently capable, we think that they're very likely to be able to break most of today's traditional forms of asymmetric encryption and be able to have the protective strength of symmetric encryption and hashes. So, really, a traditional encryption relies upon problems, these large prime number equations that quantum computers should be able to solve very quickly. And if so, it's going to immediately break, when we get sufficiently capable quantum computers, they'll be able to immediately break most of what the internet relies upon today for asymmetric encryption, meaning, RSA, Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve cryptography, and those algorithms that I just named right there, just RSA, Diffie-Hellman, and ECC, elliptic curve cryptography, that really accounts for something like 90% of the encryption we use on the internet today to protect, ourselves when we're doing HTTPS connections, Wi-Fi connections, smart cards, stuff that protects our digital logins where we're logging in with either passwords or even using multi-factor authentication. So really, it's going to have a huge impact in immediately breaking most traditional forms of asymmetric encryption. And even on the symmetric side, where you're talking advanced encryption standard, AES encryption, it's going to cut in half the protective strength of existing keys. So it really is, potentially going to have a large impact upon ourselves, our internet. Every piece of software and hardware and firmware that contains encryption is likely to have to be updated or replaced before we get quantum capable computers.
Thanks so much for that background, Roger. And that all of that sounds scary. Let's be honest, a little bit scary there, right? So, but there are a couple of solutions. So, Bruno, can you walk us through a couple of those solutions that we're looking at?
Of course, one type of solution would be to replace the math, which is behind all these cryptographic systems. And I think we'll talk about that a bit later. So that's one part of the solution. The other part is basically to use the same quantum properties which makes the quantum computer so strong against the quantum computer. I call it quantum against quantum. And there are some quantum technologies which we can use to defeat the quantum computer, and we will probably discuss that a bit more. The first one is called quantum random number generation. In order to get good cryptography, you need to start with good randomness. And quantum being non-deterministic is the best way to get this randomness for any kind of cryptographic application. So we can use it already today with RSA, Diffie-Hellman, and so on. We will use it tomorrow with post-quantum crypto, and of course with quantum cryptography, which I will discuss in a moment. So basically, first solution, improve your key generation, get better keys, and that's possible already today. Second type of solution on the quantum side is called quantum key distribution, also known as quantum cryptography. And quantum cryptography is a way to distribute the keys in a perfectly secure way. And these keys can then be used with standard cryptography. So let's say we can add another layer of security to what we have today by adding quantum key distribution to our current infrastructure. So these are the two main quantum technologies which can be used. And I think Will can talk about post-quantum crypto, which is the mathematical aspects.
Perfect. Thanks for that overview, Bruno. So we'll kind of pivot to you now. Let's hear from you. Can you describe where we are in the process of developing the new post-quantum algorithms?
Sure. But before I do that, I'll just say I want to reiterate what Bruno just said about quantum random number generation. Entropy, the quality of the entropy is fundamental to all cryptography. And that is absolutely a real weakness in today's systems. It's really hard to generate great entropy, especially on a small resource constraint system. So that is a key aspect, regardless of post-quantum crypto. But moving to post-quantum crypto, probably starting a little more than a decade ago, it was recognized that we needed to move to this new set of algorithms that would basically not be vulnerable to this thing called Shor's algorithm, which is the main threat today to current encryption. So there have been a lot of different kinds of crypto standards that have been proposed, and some of them are even as old as RSA and Diffie-Hellman. But the process has basically not really been urgent, because we had something that worked. And now suddenly we have on the horizon this quantum computing threat. So what has happened is over the last decade or so, NIST has been in the process of evaluating different post-quantum crypto standard potential standards. And just in late August of this year, they basically put forth the first draft standards, this FIPS 203, 204, and 205. So this is one standard. 203 is for key establishment mechanisms, or key encapsulation mechanisms, or KEM. And that's for doing the basically giving the equivalent of a key exchange today that we use today. That one standard is based on a so-called lattice-based crypto solution. The other two are for the digital signature standards, and one of them is also based on a similar lattice-based crypto solution. The other is based on a hash-based solution. I'm not going to get into the differences between them. I could go on for hours, but I'll just say this, that of all of these new standards, we're not done. I mean, we have a first a draft standard, but we still don't have the amount of vetting, if you will, cryptographic or cryptologic vetting that we need in order to make sure that these things work as reliably and as well as what we've been using for the last 30 years. So we're not done, but we are in the process, and we're making good progress. But the problem with that is, even if we were done, then we basically have a 10 to 15 year transition ahead of us. Everything in the world that uses asymmetric crypto will have to be migrated to these new standards. That is a really hard task. And so, we have a long way to go. And so I'll just say that for people who say, oh, okay, we have a standard, we're happy now and everything's just going to automatically switch over. I'm sorry, that's just not reality. So people who say, oh, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is 15, maybe 20 years out. Okay, let's say that that's true. If it takes us 15 years to make the transition, we're already late. So,
yeah.
Actually,
No.
I wanted to add something which I believe is of interest. All these post-quantum crypto algorithm really have been looked at in classical terms. I mean, most cryptographers in the world, probably at least the ones who are knowledgeable in post-quantum, have been looking at this. The problem is we don't have a quantum computer today. So we are not sure about what would a quantum computer do to these algorithms. We know that what the quantum algorithm we know today, like Shor and Grover, cannot attack this algorithm. But I'm quite sure that as soon as we go to real quantum computers, you will have all these clever guys will start to play with this quantum computer and probably find new stuff which we haven't found yet. So it will be good on one side because we will discover new applications of the quantum computer, but they may even also find some applications which will destroy this so-called post-quantum algorithm. We're really not sure about what will happen. So I think the risk is actually even higher than we think in the long term. As soon as we have a quantum computer, all that can be really moved very quickly. So one thing which is really important is to have flexibility, to make sure that whatever solution we choose, we can change if needed, and of course to adapt several solutions maybe to add, as I said often, a kind of onion, to add layers of security to make sure that we still have one of them if the others fail.
Yeah, and I wanted to pop back to what Will said about, we've got this supposed 10 or 15 year deadline where we have to migrate our systems from quantum susceptible cryptography to quantum resistant cryptography. And we have this, everyone's guessing, no one knows when the sufficiently capable quantum computers are going to come about. But a lot of people say, well, it could be 10 or 15 years. I think CISA and some other people said, well, you need to be prepared by 2030. So there is this idea that we have 10 or 15 years to start preparing. Well, that's kind of like the best case scenario, and it's our best guess right now. But it could turn around that, we find out tomorrow that someone's been able to create sufficiently capable quantum computers, and we don't have 10 or 15 years, we have a day or something. But on top of that, the reality is, even if we have 10 or 15 years, if that ends up being a reliable estimate, it's going to take most companies 10 or 15 years to get there, which means most companies, or every company, needs to start preparing now, today. You're late and your post-quantum cryptography migration. I kind of, when people say, well, you have 10 or 15 years, or CISA says you have till 2030 or something like that, I'm like, no. When you tell people they have 5 or 10 or 15 years to prepare for something, it's out of mind. People are worried about ransomware that's happening to them today, and Trojans and password stealing malware and all this stuff. They're like, I've got real problems today, and you're telling me this other problem, which I barely understand, is 10 or 15 years out. It goes off their plate. But what we want to say in today's talk, and everybody involved in our field, in the quantum capability field today, will tell you need to start preparing now. If you're not preparing today, you're late in preparing. So when you hear that 5, 10, or 15 year deadline, that's going to be difficult for you to make if you start today.
Yep.
And if you don't
Absolutely.
start today, obviously, then it will become really too late because it will take time to migrate all everything. That's for sure.
And there's another threat. I'll just pile on here. It's too late. Yes. There's another threat, which is called harvest and decrypt. And the basic idea is that there's a lot of transactions going across the internet today using standard key exchange that basically people believe to be secure, but there are governments, including our own, who are storing away petabytes, exabytes, even what zettabytes of this encrypted information in large data server farms. And they're waiting for the day when they can basically decrypt everything. And that day will come if it hasn't come already. And that is a threat to today, to the security of a machine that you think is secure today, and say your diplomatic fax machine, for example. Suddenly those are all readable in the future. So you have to really consider that it's too late for some applications.
Yeah, of course,
absolutely.
information which will be relevant in 5 to 10 years is already at risk. I think that's really the point. Not all information is like that, but I think the sizable amount of information might be at risk already today. So we're all saying the same message: start today.
Absolutely. And all valid points. I agree with you 100%. It's a huge issue. I know for our own group, we've created our countdown clock that is somewhere around that 2030 range, Roger, that you brought up, that CISA is also speaking about. So, but again, as you mentioned, there's really no way to know. So it is definitely relevant to start now, and organizations need to look into it if they haven't started already. So thanks for that background there, everybody. And let's talk about another topic then. Roger, this one we'll start with you on it. Now that we have an understanding of quantum technologies and how they threaten our cybersecurity, as well as some solutions, right? Can we also use the same quantum technologies that are a threat to help counter those threats? You know, Bruno touched on this just a little bit earlier when he was speaking, but can you expand upon that?
Yeah, although I probably will step back and say, anytime you're told that you have to start preparing against a quantum threat, there really are 6 different, at least that we know of right now, 6 different solutions, mitigations you can go after. One is physical isolation. If you don't want your data to be decrypted by sufficiently capable quantum computers, don't let the computers get to your data. Don't put your data out on quantum susceptible networks where they can be sniffed and stored for later decryption. So physical isolation, keeping your data from being eavesdropped on or sniffed, is a really good thing to do. You can also today make sure that you have sufficiently capable symmetric key sizes. The NSA and CISA and all says that your symmetric key sizes should be 256 bits or longer to be quantum resistant. So if you have any symmetric key sizes that are smaller than 256 bits, make sure you make them at least 256 bits. You're going to have to eventually start replacing your quantum susceptible asymmetric ciphers with quantum resistant ciphers, that post-quantum ciphers. You may want to consider using quantum key distribution, again, like Bruno talked about before, that where it uses quantum properties to protect keys today. You can also have hybrid solutions that use a combination of classical and quantum resistant cryptography, so that if one of those types fails or falls, the other one will supposedly give you protection. And again, just like you asked, there are quantum protections. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people, when they hear like post-quantum cryptography, they think that somehow is quantum cryptography. It's not. Post-quantum cryptography is traditional classical encryption that just isn't susceptible, or as susceptible, we don't think is as susceptible to quantum cryptography. So you really have these kind of 6 different ways to defend. Some of them depend on classical means, some of them use the quantum enabled means. And again, if you talk about quantum protections, there will eventually be quantum ciphers that will protect us all. But today, what your options are mostly quantum key distribution. Again, that's where, again, they're using the quantum properties, or can even use post-quantum cryptography to protect your traditional asymmetric keys or symmetric keys to get them between source and destination. And eventually we're all going to end up, I don't know how many years down the road, but eventually I think we'll all end up with quantum protected, quantum encryption enabled end nodes and networks that protect our information between source and destination.
Fantastic. Thank you so
That
much
seems
for
to
that.
me, Roger, a little bit, you're looking a bit ahead, which is perfectly fine. People call it a quantum internet somehow. The quantum internet will really allow you to distribute these keys you can use later all around the world. Today, quantum key distribution is limited in range. Given link cannot be more than a few hundred kilometers, and then you use so-called trusted node to make the key hop from one point to another. But as soon as we improve our quantum technologies with entanglement, distribution of entanglement, and so on, we will be able to build a full quantum internet where keys will be freely exchanged, and these keys can be really demonstratively secure. So let's say today we have some solutions, as Roger said, some options. Tomorrow, we hope to get more of them. That's really the point. Technology does not stand still. We got the attack, but the defense as well can be improved in the next few years. Well, it will take probably more than the next few years, maybe 10 or 15 years, the same as a quantum computer. But I think we will all see that a big network of quantum system which will allow you to fight the threat of the quantum computer, as Roger said.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for all of that insight. So you did mention PQC algorithms, Roger. And so, Will, I'd like to hear from you about PQC algorithms. What are some of the roadblocks in deploying PQC algorithms that you've seen?
Well, there are certainly lots of roadblocks. This is new territory. We haven't crossed this threshold, and frankly, it's a lot more complex than the first time we did this. It's always easier to build something new than to retrofit something new onto something that's already there. And that's the case. That second case is where we are now. We have a worldwide PKI, key infrastructure, but what we need to do is we need to add on to that without breaking it. And that's a really hard challenge. So that's the first thing. And second thing about these is these new algorithms are much, much more complex than, even Diffie-Hellman, which, people think of this as sort of a magical thing. Diffie-Hellman was a wonderful invention, but, our threat models have evolved a lot since then. And so the new algorithms are much, much more complex and, much more compute intensive. Having said that, of course, since Diffie-Hellman was invented, our computing capabilities have followed Moore's law. So we do actually have a lot more computing resources available to us, even on the very low end. So I don't think that raw computational speed is going to be the limiting factor for implementing these new algorithms. But the complexity still remains, and that is a problem. And that has to do with things like, how can you prove that something is secure when it's got 1 million lines of code versus something that's secure that has 1,000 lines of code? So that's a really big problem, and that's not going to go away. And that's independent of the cryptographically relevant quantum computers. So it's been said, and I will reiterate, that the only way that we really should be looking for this, and I'm not the only one saying this, of course, is this crypto agility concept. So layering, as Bruno said, having an onion approach, if you will, where even if one of the links fails, you still have a backstop. And so we should absolutely not just go in and say, oh, we're going to replace all of our PKI today with quantum resilient PKI. That's a silly idea. What we should be doing is layering on top. But of course, that adds another added level of complexity. And so doing key exchange, where you have multiple options that must simultaneously be exercised, is again a really highly complex thing. So that's the next level of complexity or roadblocks. Finally, I'll say this, and this is not the last point, but these PQC algorithms may have been around, some of them, for over 15 years, but they're still relatively young. I mean, Diffie-Hellman and RSA are 40 years old or 35 years old. And so they've withstood the test of time. Unfortunately, these other new algorithms are, in a sense, we know we have to rush them to the market because, as we said, it's too late. So the problem is that we have this sort of rock and a hard place situation where we know we need this, we need it yesterday, and then we have this stuff that's new that we have to implement. And so there are always going to be implementation errors and these kinds of things. And on top of that, we don't actually believe that the quantum computer threat is the most pressing threat. So if you look at the NIST competition, for example, in signatures, there was a signature scheme that was in the finalists up until a little less than 2 years ago, called Rainbow. And Rainbow is based on multivariate polynomials, and it's a great field and wonderful work there. But in what was considered, I think, an inspired bit of hacking, a postdoc cracked Rainbow on a 15-year-old laptop over a weekend. And so no quantum computer required. It was simply an error in the algorithm. Having said that, multivariate as a class of PQC algorithms is not broken. So we shouldn't take away that all multivariate schemes are wrong. We should look at, and I think we have a good idea of where we went wrong with Rainbow or where they went wrong with Rainbow. But all these are things that are going to continue to happen. So again, I'll go back to crypto agility is absolutely required because we don't know where the next Rainbow attack is going to come from.
And let me say, crypto agility, that's exactly right, Will. Crypto agility means that your software, your hardware, your firmware that is using cryptography can have the cryptographic algorithm updated without having to completely replace the software, hardware, or firmware. Right now, a lot of programs, if you need to go from one cryptographic algorithm to another, you have to completely replace the program. I mean, and that's a bad way to do cryptography. We need to think that on an ongoing basis, whatever we come up with, whatever solution we have today, 5, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to have to use something else. And so we need to make sure, we need to require of our vendors, we need to tell our vendors, are you crypto agile? And if they go, what do you mean by that? We need to educate them about what it means. And again, what it means is designing your product in such a way that we can update the cryptographic algorithm that it's using without having to completely replace the software, hardware, or firmware. So we need to start requiring that all of our products be crypto agile.
Yeah, fantastic points there. I know working in consulting, I go to clients all the time, and sometimes, looking at the post-quantum world isn't necessarily number one on their list, but I do at least encourage them to start looking at their vendors, especially if those vendors are going to house data for them, certain cloud providers and things like that. And luckily, from what I've seen, they are working towards some level of solutions, but I don't have any details there. But again, encouraging everybody to at least start talking to their vendors about it is a good place to start. So fantastic. And thanks for that input, everybody. Will, we're going to kind of keep going with you a little bit, and let's get out our crystal ball and take a look in there and talk about, what are some of the likely outcomes for the quantum threats we've talked about, as well as the solutions we've been discussing.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm going to follow on something that Bruno had said earlier, which is we don't have quantum computers in our pockets today, and so we don't really have a lot of experience in what is actually possible with a quantum computer. So yes, we have Shor's algorithm, we have other Grover's algorithm. They've been around for a long time, but these are all theoretical things that were invented, 15, 20 years ago, when people were thinking, oh, someday we'll have a quantum computer. We have quantum computers today. They're not very big, but when everybody in the world has access to a very inexpensive quantum computer, there will be things that people have just never thought about. I mean, think about it. Before the internet, who would have thought of something like eBay or Amazon even, right? And today, that kind of stuff dominates our world. So there will be things that we just cannot expect. Now, I'll also say that the concept of a Shor's algorithm capable cryptographically relevant quantum computer is well known. People understand, sort of a time frame for that. But that prediction actually goes in total opposition to the history of computing. So the way that the computing revolution was started back in World War II was at a place called Bletchley Park. And they were not building a general purpose computer that was capable of running Fortran and doing other things. They were building a very specific computer that was aimed at one thing, and it was aimed at breaking the Enigma codes. And so if you say, oh, I'm going to have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer in 20 years, you say, okay, that makes sense based on the technology we have today and on the concept that we're going to use a general purpose quantum computer to implement Shor's algorithm. But I guarantee there are people working today on Shor's algorithm accelerators in the quantum domain. And that is a lot easier task to attack than a general purpose quantum computer. So I'm just saying, looking out there in that crystal ball, we may already be susceptible. We just don't know it yet. So that's one crystal ball thing. So these are all threats that sort of come out of unexpected directions from taking what we have today and just extrapolating. But I'll go back to just sort of finish up with saying my biggest concern is the complexity of these PQC algorithms and the fact that we're trying to rush them out to market, rush in a 10-year sense, right? And so this is an urgency. It's a very urgent matter, but we also have to realize that, there's a trade-off between speed of execution and security, and that's a real problem. And so, there are just going to be a ton of opportunities for mistakes, and there will be, and when those mistakes are there and we don't know about them, hackers will discover them. They'll discover them very quickly. So, that's my crystal ball. I'm sorry, it's not more rosy.
Oh man, there's a lot of scary things out there, and I think bringing awareness to it is what we're here for today. So, thanks for that insight. So, Bruno, let's hear from you a little bit. This is something you brought up earlier, about mathematics and how we're going to move forward with it. So, who do you think will be the winner? Will it be mathematics with PQC or quantum?
I think we should move out of this one or the other. I think we need two winners, actually. And there will be definitely a winner in mathematics. Except if we realize that something dreadful happens in the complexity theory, saying that in fact there is no possible algorithm, which seems very unlikely. We will probably have some algorithms which will withstand the quantum computer. It may not be one of the ones we are thinking about today, but then there will be others. At the same time, the quantum technology will evolve, and we also be able to counter the threat of the quantum computer. And the winner will be a mixture of everything. We will have to use both in order to make sure that we have good security. As we already mentioned, flexibility, the idea that we need different layers and so on, this will be the winner, not one technology. I think definitely we cannot know that one technology will win, and therefore we have to make sure we are using all the weapons we have in this fight against the quantum computer.
Wonderful. Yeah. And it just seems like, just to sum it up a little bit between what you and Will and Roger have been saying, there's a lot of, we just need to be agile. It sounds like we need to consider everything we have available to us, but also consider that in the future, there may be unknown threats or unknown things. So it's just staying on top of it all and keeping it on our radar, basically, and working towards a solution. So it just sounds like there's a lot to do, right? And so, Roger, when and how should most organizations be preparing for the coming quantum threat? I know we've touched on this a little bit. We've kind of talked about it already, but can you expand upon that a little bit and help out everyone who's dialed in today?
Yeah, certainly. If you have not started your post-quantum project, you need to start it today. I talk a lot about this issue, about the coming quantum threat around the country and the world. And most people I talk to are not even aware of this problem. Most board of directors are not aware of this coming problem. you need to make sure that everyone in your organization, or at least all the relevant people, your C-level officers, your board of directors, that they understand that there is this, pretty soon they're going to be spending a lot of money. Because remember what we said here is that every bit of software, hardware, firmware that has cryptography in it is going to have to be updated or replaced. This is a major, major project getting ready to hit every single organization. It's going to hit you at home, your PCs and your computers and your devices and your web cameras and your routers and your switches. They're all going to have to be updated or replaced, and it's coming soon. So number one is you need to start preparing now. If you do not have a post-quantum project that started, you need to start one now. And that means, again, going to your board of directors, explaining what's happening, what's getting ready to happen, getting an official post-quantum project initiated, getting senior management sponsorship and support of that project, getting one or more team leaders of that project, starting to collect your team members together, educating the team members on that project and anybody else throughout the organization that might have to be educated. That literally is step number one, getting your post-quantum project going now, if you don't already have one. Number two, one of the first things any organization is going to have to do is do what we call a data protection inventory, which is inventorying all the software, hardware, and firmware in your organization that has cryptography, finding out what type of cryptography it has, what are the cryptographic algorithms, is it asymmetric, is it symmetric, what are the different types of cryptography algorithms within those, is it RSA, is it Diffie-Hellman, is it elliptic curve cryptography, is it AES, is it, whatever it might be, what are the key sizes, and what's the existing key sizes, and what is the maximum potential key size? Because you're going to be having to determine, this is the software, hardware, and firmware that we're going to have to update and or replace. Or maybe you'll have stuff that is already running symmetric cryptography with 256 bits of key protection. You're like, oh, that's already quantum resistant, and we're not going to have to upgrade or replace it. But that's what every organization needs to do, is do this comprehensive data protection inventory, finding out what cryptography your company uses at a software, hardware, and firmware level, documenting what is the current cryptography and current key sizes, what is the maximum effective cryptography and key size that could possibly be used without having to update or replace that cryptography. You need to get that going now. That's probably going to be a multi-year project in most organizations. And it's going to be tough because in a lot of cases, you've got programs running that have been running in some organizations, for decades, and they have no idea what type of cryptography is in it at all. It was hard coded, and the person or the company that coded that project is, no longer around. They could have died. So step number one, if you don't have a post-quantum project initiated, get one initiated. Let your board of directors and senior management and all the relevant people know what's going on, get a project started. Number two, start taking your data protection inventory to find out what is kind of your current status about what looks like it's going to be quantum resistant versus quantum susceptible. You need to also start implementing policies that don't allow quantum susceptible cryptography into your organization. You need to stop the hemorrhaging. You don't want to be buying projects that has AES 128 bits in it, right? You want to start making sure that you're stopping more damage, more weak cryptography from coming into your place. And you want to start talking to your vendors about being crypto agile and asking what they're doing to start preparing for this post-quantum world. I guarantee you a lot of vendors are going to say, crypto agility, I've never heard of that, or post-quantum what? So you're going to be part of the process of educating your vendors so they start preparing themselves, and they can turn around and give you updated software, hardware, and firmware so that you can start preparing for the post-quantum future. So that's it.
Roger, I'm going to pile on to that, Roger, by saying, so here's people understand, at least the people who are aware of this, understand the need for doing a crypto inventory. And that is, like you say, there are not a lot, but there are some people who understand. I think one of the threats, though, that people don't necessarily really fully understand is this the thing we mentioned earlier of harvest now, decrypt later. So now you also have to do an inventory of the messages that you may have sent off, decades ago, maybe saying, oh, here's the root of trust protected by some, ECC. Here's our root of trust. And you don't even know that message was sent, but it's in there. It's in the record somewhere. That's going to be an incredibly hard inventory to do. So it's too late. I'm sorry. It's too late.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting there is, again, going on the client side, when I go see clients, asset inventories in general, having complete ones, I know it's very difficult, and trying to track down what you're saying, about the cryptography on those assets and everything. And then Will, as you mentioned, going back in time to figure out, what kind of data has been sent, how it was sent. It sounds like so much, and it sounds like a lot to consider. But again, as you mentioned, getting started, doing it now, getting that project, post-quantum project started, and communicating with leaders and the board is extremely important. So thank you for those wonderful takeaways, I think, that our audience can use to get started. Okay, so at this time, we are sadly at a close for this panel with everyone that we've got on the call. I do want to say thank you to our quantum experts today for sharing your expertise and sharing your background here. I know I learned a lot, and I hope our audience did as well. There's some information up on the screen here for you. We have our webpage on the Cloud Security Alliance page if you want to get a little more information about our group. We also have a LinkedIn page that we'd like to encourage anyone attending today to start following. We put up, newsletters and other relevant information. So feel free to follow us on there. We would like to encourage you to also join our working group. We meet every other Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, US. We do have members from all over the world that join us, and we'd be happy if you would join us as well. Thank you again to our panel, and thank you again to everyone who joined today. And we hope you have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.